Good morning, Remax Distinctive. It's Dan Bouchard with the Maryland compliance for June 2026 and for Maryland compliance and broker training of agents. So, compliance is often never a problem until it's a problem. Problems often surface only when a complaint is filed against us. Legal and ethical compliance is a carrot and stick endeavor. Our effort is always to empower you with knowledge so you can enjoy the carrot and avoid the stick if a problem surfaces. So, Maryland 2026 required broker training. This Maryland real estate case illustrates the critical importance of a timely agency disclosure and obtaining written consent. Failing to use mandatory Maryland Real Estate Commission forms can lead to significant disciplinary penalties, including license suspension or revocation. An agent, Sarah, had an exclusive buyer agency agreement with a couple looking to purchase a home in Clinton, Maryland. One afternoon, Sarah showed her buyers a property that her own brokerage had listed. The problem is because Sarah's brokerage represented both the seller and the buyer, a dual agency situation was created. However, Sarah was eager to write up the offer quickly and failed to stop and explain the dual agency relationship. She also neglected to have her parties sign the mandatory written affirmation copy of the consent for dual agency form before presenting the offer. Sellers later discovered Sarah had previously shown her buyers other homes, realized she had confidential knowledge about what her buyers were willing to pay, and felt they were disadvantaged in the negotiations. The seller filed a formal complaint with the Maryland Real Estate Commission. In a situation where an agent fails to obtain proper written consent for dual agency, the Real Estate Commission most commonly uses a combination of financial penalties, mandatory education, and official reprimands. Because Sarah's actions created an undisclosed dual agency that disadvantaged a consumer, she faces statutory administrative penalties. The most common disciplinary results include under Maryland law, the MRAC can impose severe penalties for license law violations. First-time offenses can carry a fine of up to $5,000 per violation and subsequently go up to $15,000 and $25,000 for more repeated compliance issues. Typically, for first offenses, the fine is usually around $1,500 to $3,000. That's quite substantial for missing a document that could have been signed when it was needed. So one of the things that I'd like to point out here is that even though the complaint of the seller was that because she possessed information on the buyer's qualifications and their ability to pay more, the sellers felt like they should have been entitled to having that knowledge and information. And while that's incorrect, that's an incorrect assumption of the seller to think that. What the Real Estate Commission ended up doing is dismissing that point, but instead replacing that point with the simple fact that the disclosure was never actually made. And therein was the problem. So the commission frequently orders agents to complete extra non-reimbursable continuing education hours. And so she probably would have had to have done a repetitive Maryland real estate law legislative update class and an MREC agency disclosure class. These hours are strictly remedial and cannot be counted toward her standard license renewal requirements. So it's in addition to the standard licensing requirements. She could receive a formal reprimand. And in severe cases where this is a repetitive issue, she could receive license suspension or revocation if she does not complete those punitive actions. So beyond the MREC's direct penalties, Sarah and her brokerage face extreme financial civil risk because she acted as an undisclosed dual agent. The injured principal, in this case the seller, has the legal grounds to rescind the entire real estate transaction and sue to ensure the brokerage forfeits all rights to the sales commission. And really, that lawsuit, because of the damages, um, could be much more punitive to the agent and to the brokerage than simply just a reversal of the transaction, and could actually include all of the expenses and costs that the seller incurred in doing all of that. So it could be very, very, very costly to the brokerage and to the individual agent. So that's why we push and inform these classes that we teach, because there's a lot of risk to the brokerage and to you as a licensee. So better to be knowledgeable and informed. So mandatory disclosure at first contact is required. So we've got to disclose that the consent for dual agency. If the client refuses to sign a consent for dual agency, then that inherently means that you cannot allow showings on the property to um, to buyers who are also represented by RE/MAX distinctive agents. So if you have a listing and you've got a and you are and your seller refuses to sign the consent for dual agency, then you are inherent. What you're saying is that the buyer is the seller is refusing to allow RE/MAX distinctive agents to participate in a sale. So that's inherently what you're doing. Similar, it's the same scenario if it's a buyer that you are trying to represent and trying to get them to sign the consent for dual agency. In that case, you cannot show the buyer RE/MAX distinctive listings. So either way, by failing to sign the consent, the client is forfeiting the ability to expose their property to agents within RE/MAX distinctive and their clients. Anybody has any questions on that? Give me a call, send me a text, send me an email at dbouchard, DBOUCHARD at remaxdistinctive.com. And let's go hit the streets and make some money. Thanks.